Hello and welcome back to the Unique Hospitality Podcast. Today it's just me, no Connor, first time in a while, so I'll do my best as a solo host. I may be a little bit rusty. Thankfully, we do have a familiar guest with us today. It's Bygnal Dutson from Open Sky, who I think this is his third appearance. But he's also being joined by Wes McCloskey, who is his general manager at Open Sky. And the reason Wes is here is because we're focusing today on the nitty gritty, the day-to-day details of operating a glamping site, specifically in that general manager role, which may be you, it may be someone you hire, or something in between. For your glamping business. So I'm pretty excited to get Bygnal back. It's always fun to speak to Bygnal. He's one of the most ambitious and successful operators I know, and there's always something that he has to teach us. I'm also excited to speak to Wes. I think we spoke at the glamping show last time, and I know how obsessive Bygnal is about everything he does at Open Sky, and so I know that Wes will be a hire that Bygnal thought very, very carefully about, and so he'll be super, super good at his job. So I look forward to a bit of a masterclass today in the day-to-day operations of operating a glamping site and the unique challenges that you should expect in this business. So I'll keep the introduction short, seeing as it's just me today. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and here's Bygnal and Wes. Hello, here we are, Bygnal and Wes. Bygnal, great to have you back. Wes, great to have you on for the first time. How's it going at Open Sky, gents?
It's great to be back. It's good to see you, Nick. Unfortunately, I don't know why Connor had to just skip out on this one.
Just being lazy.
Being lazy. He's going to regret it. So, anyway, so without Connor, we'll have to just figure it out and make something happen here.
Yeah.
It's good to be back.
It's not like I did this podcast for about 3.5 years before Connor arrived on the scene. It's okay. No, we will miss Connor. He's taken this podcast to another level. So hopefully the audience are patient with my weaker presenting style, but we'll get there in the end. So as I mentioned in the intro, Bygnal, you've been on here. I think this is your third appearance now. So a lot of the listeners will be aware of Open Sky, but for those who aren't, could you just give us the quick kind of 1 minute summary of what you are, what you do, what units you have, etc.
Absolutely. So Open Sky is a little bit unique. So I got very fortunate to be able to do this in my backyard. So I grew up here in southern Utah, right by Zion National Park. So we have 80 acres. We are fully off grid, right adjacent to the park, which is absolutely stunning. We're 3.5 miles off the main highway, which is the right amount of space between like civilization down by the freeway to feeling like fully immersed into nature. So we really love like the balance that's been able to create for us. So here at Open Sky, we've got currently right now we have 13 luxury camps. That's kind of what we call them. They are safari camps that we purchased from Bush Tech Safari. We customize them, build them into our own unique kind of way that made Open Sky unique. And we also have a on-site restaurant called Black Sage. So it is a farm-to-table kind of culinary experience with some elevated comfort food that serves for our guests as well as for non-guests too. So the people staying at other resorts around the area, locals, you can come up here and be able to kind of get a glimpse of Open Sky and kind of get that little taste of that experience too. So we have a lot of fun with that.
Awesome. And Wes was saying before you arrived, Bygnal, that your occupancy is looking pretty strong recently.
It is. This has been a really incredible Q1 for 2025, like better than I expected to, with just all the questionability that kind of happened at the beginning of this year. There was a lot of uncertainty. So it actually turned out to be better, which I'm extremely grateful for. We'll have to see how the summer turns out.
Absolutely. Now, so we're going to start off, obviously, Bygnal, you're the founder of Open Sky. You had to wear a million hats to begin with. Starting from raising the capital to physically, digging the trenches and working on the construction to obviously once you're operating, you were the general manager as well as, I'm sure a load of other roles at the same time. Wes since came in and is now the GM, and you've kind of taken a step out and you can, work on things from more of a kind of top down perspective, Bygnal. But obviously in the early days, as I say, you were the GM, you were the one in the trenches and managing, all aspects of the guest experience and the back end operations. So I'm curious, just as a starting point, kind of when did you begin to move away from the capital raising construction mode into the, you're in charge of the whole experience, and kind of what was that transition like?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big story, and I know everybody's was going to have a different perspective on that. All I knew was a little bit of construction. I didn't have any hospitality background, so it was all brand new and fresh to me. I had no idea what I was doing, and all I knew is I wanted to build something cool, and that's kind of the passion that kind of kept me going through it. Spent about 2 years on the kind of the capital raising side of things. We was able to go put together some big plans, some big ideas, some renderings, and try to pitch it to 20, 30 different banks, some different investors. And I thought it was a cool idea, but it was just not feasible. I mean, I was 24, 25 at the time. Yes, we had a little bit of money into it, but it wasn't like enough to really just like, you got some deep pockets. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and take this big risk out on you guys. Ultimately, what happened is COVID hit, and we was getting pretty close with having a deal together with doing some USDA financing with some other potential groups. And as soon as COVID happened, everybody just backed down. It's like, hey, we're not even interested at all. So I went back to my 3 original partners and said, hey guys, should we move forward with this? Should we not? And we decided ultimately to let's go ahead and build some prototypes. And we just had purchased 3 cannabis camps from Africa. They just arrived the week before the shutdowns. And we went back to the drawing board, quickly re-engineered everything, scaled everything down. Let's just get these 3 going, and then kind of put like a rough kind of capital raise what we needed to do. Went and talked to a mentor friend of mine. He was willing to give us half of that. And then we took the other properties we had up in North Dakota with my other partners. We had some HELOCs on that. So that's kind of how we got started with the capital side. And then Nathan, one of the other partners, he is really good about like showing up and like taking some serious, massive action, getting things started. I think I was probably had a little bit of a analysis by paralysis moment for a long time. Like, it's planned, I want to make sure everything's perfect, everything's planned. All the permits are in place. Everything's down to detail before we even like put a shovel in the ground. And Nate's like, no, let's go. So I give a lot of credit to Nathan for helping just push that and make that happen for that first like Traco showing up and that first like just getting started and making it happen. So that started July of 2020. And that's kind of when the transition happened. So it switched from full on, okay, let's go find some money, let's talk about this idea, to like, okay, let's go. We pretty much from that point on until April that next year was just 6-7 days a week, just figuring it out, putting trenches in, digging trenches, putting utilities in the ground, starting with building the tents, trying to figure all that out. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we couldn't bring any installers from Africa over here. So we had to figure out how to build these tents off a little 6-page document all in metrics, which for us Americans is pretty hard and difficult.
Listeners will know that I'm involved with EGH distribution. A lot of units are from Europe that we use, and that's a pretty familiar situation for EGHs. We got a 6-page manual, all in metric. Yep. Let's figure this one out.
Yeah, so it's fun. So go buy yourself a metric measuring tape, and you'll be okay. You'll survive.
Yeah. So carry on, sir.
Yep. So that was kind of like the journey there that really got it started. So went in full in construction mode. I was the developer, general contractor, and pretty much we in-housed most of it. I brought in certain subs as we needed to that we couldn't really do in-house. For the most part, we tried to do most of it because it was just trying to get somebody up here. Everybody was busy during COVID with all the remodels, and we just mostly just had to figure out and bootstrap it. By that spring, was able to finally get them kind of wrapped up and done. And then kind of through that transition, I was building the website with a marketing firm, got that up and going. We ended up actually pulling a glamping software out of the UK in the very beginning. I have to go back and look and see which one of them, but they had just like small properties and something. Oh, this will work. Let's get started with it. Onboarded with them, figured that all out, and launched the website. And then we put it up on Airbnb for the first 3 units, and that's how we began. Next thing you know, we got a booking, and I mean, that's a whole nother story for another time. But yeah, started that process and had no idea what I was doing. The first guest showed up, and I'm like, "Hey, here's your camp, like, welcome." And over time, you slowly start to refine it. And I was just boots on ground for the first 3 years of, well, I guess two years of operating, and I just had to just slowly figure it out. Like there was no formula, there was no structure, there was no accountability. It was just like sheer like answer phone call, email, run out, make sure tents were cleaned, making sure everybody's showing up, like taking care of the guest. And it was a lot. I'll be honest.
Yeah, and was there anywhere, did you read any books? Did you watch any videos? Did you study anything to try and help you figure out because you were the GM there, How did you figure out what a GM looked like? Or was it just purely on intuition and kind of dealing with each day as it came?
It was just really just pure intuition. It was just kind of figuring out. Yes, I was reading, I mean, different books, videos when I could, but I was just so busy in the trenches. There was just not even time to even think about anything. I did finally meet a couple friends that were in the hospitality space and trying to get some advice and some opinions from them. So they definitely helped start pulling in some structure on that.
So that, in the early days, it sounds like there were three distinct roles that you had. There's capital raiser, construction guy, and
Yep.
GM. Is there any particular hat that fitted more naturally on you and that you enjoyed in particular?
Well, I knew construction, so that was definitely a lot more familiar. I don't necessarily say I just absolutely just enjoy it. Like I'll do it for myself, but it's one of the things that I don't find a whole lot of passion in anymore. I think the fundraising side, I mean, it's difficult. So it's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of phone calls, pitching to people, putting
Tell me
projects
about
together, spreadsheets. I mean, you just gone through this, Nick, so you know all about it.
Yeah.
And then the operations side, I think like the best about the operations side, like being a general manager, is just like the guest satisfaction, like being able to like deliver that experience to them. I think it brings a lot of passion, joy, because I have a lot of empathy and I love to host. So there's that side.
And I think I described you in the intro as you're obsessive, really, in terms of you're obsessed over the details of your business, and you're passionate about it, and you want everything to be as good as it possibly can be. And I think that that applies naturally to construction and making sure everything's in the right place. But I think it's particularly applicable to the guest experience, right? Because you want all the intangibles to be in place so that the guests can have the best possible experience. You get the best possible reviews, the best guest retention, and ultimately the most profit. So I feel like that would come quite naturally to you, right? That role of GM and making sure everything's in the right place and that guest experience.
Yeah, I feel like I naturally kind of picked up on. I may not have all the tools of how to like structure and like actually build like a foundation and company. And that's kind of like where I finally got Wes, which we'll jump into that a little bit later. That's been like the great side, like us complementing each other has been pretty incredible.
And so just before we start moving on to Wes's arrival, was there any particular challenges that you had when you were wearing the GM hat that you remember, or anything that you found particularly difficult that was difficult to find a solution for?
I think the first thing is just not having any times, because like we were either like doing construction or like operations and trying to like merge both those into the same world and trying to like build a team around you at the same time. Like I never really built a team before. Like this is my first time on my own trying to build a company. You don't know how to go do payroll and hiring and HR. So that's probably my biggest thing. I just pulled from the folks that I knew and just trying to like, hey friends, like come up here, talk to my other cousin, and they brought somebody up, and just try to like do it that way and just bootstrapping it. So that was probably a big struggle for me, was that, because we had so many different, we had a small team, right? And you have a big size property, and you have to figure out how to wear multiple hats. And I think that's where I struggled with, was creating that accountability and that structure for everybody on the same page and the systems.
Yeah, I get that. Even from where we're at Posh now, is there's always something else that you can be doing that's an immediate need, that means you do push back the processes and systems that you ultimately need to implement in the long run. So I can completely relate to that. Moving on to as Wes started to arrive then. So at what point did you decide, okay, now's the time for me to just step back a little bit and let someone else come in and manage the day-to-day, so that you can kind of step back?
So this was a dream always from the beginning. I just didn't know how to do it. And so this is just kind of my story and how this kind of process happened. I got to the point after several different phases of construction, operational for 5, 6, 7, 8 months out of the year. We got to the point where we had 10 camps, and we were just starting to build 3 more, and our laundry building and the restaurant and everything else. Up until that point, I may have had like 1 or 2 days off in 3 years. Other than that, I was working every single day. And I was completely toast. I was burned out. I was not present anymore. And I did not want to, like, this was my baby. I didn't think anybody else could actually really have the ability to keep it together. And I was just super nervous about it, because we put everything into it. And so if you pick the wrong person in a transition to a general manager, it could sink your company, or it could take it to the next level. And that was the risk. And I wasn't really quite in a spot where I was willing to let go of the reins and actually trust somebody with that. And that's because I never found the right person, is honestly what it came down to. But I got to the point where I was so burned out that I had to make the conscious decision, is somebody even like half as good as I was as far as keeping everything together, would still do a better job than I currently was in that state. And that's kind of what pushed me over the edge and being okay with it.
And so what did the process look like that ended up bringing Wes to you?
I was not comfortable enough just because of my hiring experience. I really hired anybody else. I'm trying to find that really good, like general manager that really like that role. I ended up hiring a recruiting company. It was actually Horizon Hospitality. I didn't even have time to hardly even make to the interviews, but they did all. I mean, it definitely costs money, but it's, if you don't have the time and it's that critical position, it's worth the money. And that's kind of how we found Wes. And so with Horizon, like they went through and talked with us, like with me, like what am I looking for? What do I need? And then they narrowed down their search and actually brought 5 phenomenal candidates to the table that we all interviewed. They're all really good.
That's Scott Foos, right? Is that his firm?
Yeah, that's his.
Yeah. Okay. And Wes, perfect time to bring you in. What's your background first of all? Leading up to this position.
So my background in a nutshell is I used to do financial management as a consultant, a contractor. I was with IBM and PwC for a time. Decided to make a career change, and to do that, I joined Peace Corps, and I ended up being abroad for about 7 years. And during that time, I kind of fell into hospitality. I met an owner of an upscale eco lodge, which was also 100% off the grid, just like Open Sky. And he was looking for somebody with XYZ. And so he hired me, and I GM'd his place for 2 seasons. And then from there, I just stuck with hospitality. Came back to the States, got in with Getaway, now Postcard Cabins, but I opened up a couple of their properties, one in Washington, one in the Catskills in New York. And also worked at Off-Grid Dude Ranch for a time, and ended up in New Mexico, and that's when Horizon Hospitality reached out to me.
I had no idea you were at Getaway. That's cool. Definitely come back to that later. So Horizon reached out to you. What did the interview process look like from there?
Yeah, it was very structured, which was nice. So, kind of came across as very official and serious. And they were basically I was filling out documents, kind of like profiling documents as far as my work experience went. And eventually I made my way to Bygnal and interviewed with him.
First impressions on both sides? Starting with you, Wes.
Yeah, my first impression was great. Like I said, Horizon Hospitality set a pretty serious tone. And so this wasn't like an Indeed ad I was responding to. And then my first impression speaking with Bygnal was great. It was very natural discussion.
Bygnal?
Yeah, I don't think Wes really gave himself much credit here. So this off-grid eco lodge that he was working on was actually over in Madagascar. So he has some really cool experiences. So maybe someday we can do a little fire chat, talk about Madagascar stories.
Oh, absolutely. Go on then.
Yeah,
first impression of Wes.
My first impression is actually I almost skipped over Wes as an interview, to be frankly honest, because Horizon, they present, okay, here's their salary and here's what they're looking for in the package. And it was actually outside of my comfort zone of what I was really looking for and wanting to do. And it was a click of a button of reject or do I accept this? And ultimately what it came down to is I'm like, it can't hurt to at least talk to him and see, because it was close. Okay, if actually he was that right person, we'll go figure it out. And so the first impression got on there with Wes. At that point, Wes was actually the last interview that I had. So I actually had four previous ones. It was all great candidates. Just something wasn't quite clicking, just quite perfect with it. And with Wes, it kind of matched all the boxes. He had experience with off-grid. He was in the hospitality industry, all the different roles that I did not have a great skill set in. And one thing that really stood out about Wes is he actually took the time to go research Open Sky. He went and read all of our reviews, and he brought some really great questions to the table, which nobody else did. It was all about them, not about the company, which it goes both ways. And that made a huge first impression on me. And so one of the questions that he asked is hey, what's your biggest guest glitch? What are the biggest things that guests are coming back to you guys with? And at the time I was that's a very interesting question, but not looking back on it, you as a GM, potential GM coming into this, you want to kind of know what you're getting yourself into. What are your guest issues? Because, so this is going to be a problem you're going to have to solve. And the answer, actually, what I told him is guests were complaining that they actually only booked one night when they should have booked 2 or 3 nights because they had such a great experience. And so that was an issue because we was booked out and we had the 10 camps at that point in time. So like my biggest glitch is people show up booking one night, they get here and they wish we would have booked 2 nights. So that's kind of how that started.
Awesome. And was that, was it just from a place of general curiosity that you're asking those questions, Wes? Were you trying to make your future job easier? Were you trying to, scope Bygnal out? What was the reason behind those?
Yeah, it's like Bygnal says, like an interview is 2 ways. So I feel like I'm also interviewing the company that I'm interviewing for. And yeah, I reviewed all the guest feedback that I could find. I wanted to see if I could find patterns in their glitches, read the responses to the feedback, and just, I need to know what I'm walking into. Yeah, so I just kind of dove deep into that before the interview just to see, what kind of challenges I would be facing, and and all that. So yeah.
Bygnal, I know, Open Sky is your baby and you care deeply about it and you put so much into it, as you said. So how did you, presumably you have to have a lot of trust to hand the reins or some of the reins over to someone like Wes. So how did you get comfortable with that? Was it a trial period, or were you, sufficiently impressed by Wes early on? Kind of what was your process for believing him to hand over those reins?
Yeah, so and it was a little foggy for me because I was halfway in and halfway out of that point in time. But Wes can probably correct me, but from my perspective, I was very straightforward with Wes. I'm like, Wes, this is my baby. I have a hard time like trusting with somebody. And so you're going to have to be patient with me. And you also have to be telling me too, like, hey, if I'm being too overbearing as an owner, because I'm always here too, like still doing construction, working on things. If this is like this boundary starts getting pushed around, like you need to let me know. We need to communicate about this. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be like watching over your shoulder. I'm going to be watching every little detail as you kind of get your feet wet into this operation in this place. And I think Wes was like, okay, like he was patient enough with me because like there's a lot of patience Wes had to have with me in the very beginning and letting that go. And my other big concern too was just the team that I actually had at that point in time. How are they going to handle this transition to this new general manager, going from the owner to a general manager, and that kind of that separation? That's a huge transition too. So I was keeping that in consideration too. And that's kind of how I got started.
Well, yeah. Well, Wes, why don't you just walk us through, your first few weeks in the job, what your early priorities were, how you ingratiated yourself with the team, and just tell us, what those first few weeks look like.
Yeah, so I approached it as a learning experience. I told Bygnal during the interview process, I think, that I wouldn't be bringing any suggestions or changes to the table until after I had learned the processes and everything that they had in place, and that might take a couple of months. So I was just operating that way. I was working front desk, learning housekeeping and all of their systems and procedures. And really, it's one thing to open a property like I did with Getaway, open a couple properties and then hire your team and train them and get the operation going. And then it's another thing to walk into an operation that's already moving and getting the team's buy-in. So another question during the interview process was, what's the most important quality of a manager? And I think it's consistency, because if you can be consistent in all ways, then your team can rely on you and then they can trust you. And so that was my approach to getting the team's buy-in to my leadership.
Hello, listeners. This is Sherry Halala, founder of Sage Outdoor Advisory. If you're launching an outdoor hospitality project like glamping, we can help. We offer feasibility studies and appraisals. What that means is we look at your specific market and proposed business offering and complete an in-depth analysis to make sure that your planned business will be profitable. Getting a second opinion on your proposal and forecasted financials is critical to understand before you spend years of your time and hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is particularly important if you are looking to raise money for your project from a bank or private investors. They are going to want to see this type of deep dive analysis from an independent third-party specialist in the industry. We at Sage have completed well over 250 feasibility studies and appraisals in outdoor hospitality in North America in the last 4 years. So we understand what it takes to bring a project from concept to reality. If this sounds like it could be helpful to you, you can go to our website, sageoutdooradvisory.com, and schedule a call with our team. While you're there, check out our proprietary glamping database map too. Thanks. Now back to the show.
So Wes, what was it like coming into that situation? Obviously, there's an existing team, but then you've also got Bygnal to deal with, who, as he said, he's looking over your shoulder. He cares deeply about everything that's going on. So how did you deal with that and make sure that you were kind of winning him over as you were in the early days of your role?
Yeah, it's like a lot of empathy, really, because if I put myself into Bygnal's shoes, I would understand he doesn't want somebody coming in and just changing everything without understanding how things are already set up and where things stand. So, it was that learning experience. I think it's really important to practice a lot of humility, but and at the same time, after having been in this niche of the industry for several years, I feel comfortable with it. And this property takes a while to learn. I mean, it's 100% off the grid. There's a bunch of moving parts. And it was incredibly busy. That first year, 2023, was a very, very busy year for the Open Sky team.
So presumably, after a little while working together, you settled into a groove. Bygnal, you kind of, took a step back and could see that Wes could handle a lot of the things that you wanted him to handle. So what does your relationship look like now? And, how often, Bygnal, what are you doing these days? Wes, what are you doing these days? How often do you speak? How does that relationship look like?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll kind of go on this one. So after that kind of point in time, I got to know Wes a lot more and started trusting him and started giving him more and more and like being comfortable, like, okay, like he's following through, like he's got an incredible system. And I'm like, Wes has actually turned into more of a mentor for me, to be very honest with you. Like he's been pretty incredible in that regards. So I've been able to like just really like, okay, here Wes, like go handle this. I like to be still involved with overall business and like with the guest experience and on the construction and kind of guest improvement side. Still have a pretty big hand inside of that. So I'm up here to the property at least 4, sometimes 5, if not 6 days of the week still, because there's just so much to do. And it just takes a full team to even be able to handle it. So that's kind of what I do mostly. In between there, I'm working on just improvements. I kind of take care of all like the finances and making sure like the back end's kind of working on that side. And just supporting the admin team. So like Wes and our executive chef and so people, just making sure they have what they need to make their jobs easier. So that's kind of my whole job now, is making sure the team has what they need, the tools, the resources to effectively do their job.
Where's your like weekly routine?
Yeah, so it definitely varies. I always walk in every day with a list of to-dos and things I'd like to accomplish, but you can never really anticipate everything that's going to pop up during the day, and my days, do get derailed and I have to deprioritize. But as far as the weekly routine goes, I touch base with all the department heads, F&B, housekeeping, maintenance, guest experience, etc. Payroll, keeping an eye on, all the accounts, all those things. So just trying to keep myself everywhere and informed about everything. And yeah, like Big says, sometimes he's in here 5-6 days a week, but sometimes we even share an office. Sometimes things are so busy that we don't even get a chance to catch up because he's busy on a property improvement project and I'm busy with, F&B or housekeeping on something like that. So I try to keep routine as much as I can, but I have to allow a lot of flexibility there to deal with the day-to-day and interesting things that might pop up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, presumably, you have these regular check-ins, but there'll be things that you'll get dragged into that, just will come up as part of the gig. So what kind of situations would you end up getting dragged into, on a day-to-day?
Oh, that's going to be a juicy one.
It really depends. It could be a guest recovery effort. If something goes wrong with the guest, that gets my full attention immediately, and I'll jump in on that and either instruct people what to do or I'll just take point on it myself. If we're short staffed somewhere, as a GM, I like to consider myself a stopgap, and I'll jump in and I'll do front desk. I've washed dishes, anything else that needs done.
On guest recovery, I know we had Jacob Halverson, who's been GM at Mendocino Grove in California. He's now the experienced manager at Bishop's Lodge, which is a auberge resort in Arizona, I think, somewhere around there. And he kind of gave us his best practices for dealing with an unhappy guest. So I'd be curious to know what you would do in a situation where, I don't know, let's say, give me a typical example of something that would go wrong that a guest would be unhappy with, and how you would deal with that situation.
So a typical example, well, first of all, we don't have that many situations where we need to do a guest recovery, so that when it does pop up, it's easy to put a lot more into it, right? So, if somebody has an issue with an amenity in their camp, you got to respond immediately. You got to keep it very personable, and you have to have an empathetic mindset. Put yourself into their shoes. They may have never been in a situation like this before. They might be used to city life and not so much this kind of outdoorsy experience. And yeah, so we give them that immediate response and try to fix whatever is going on. If not, you got to pivot and find a different solution for them. And I believe that there's always a way. There's always a solution to a problem. You just got to find it. The biggest thing, though, is the team. They obsess about the guest recovery. They're equipped to handle it before coming to me to deal with it. And as soon as something pops up, the team's just all over it. And we will go above and beyond to recover a guest because we don't want any guests leaving here unhappy. And so our guest recovery rate is really high.
I'm curious to know as well the differences you've experienced as a GM at Open Sky, which is an independent, smaller resort, versus your time at Getaway, now Postcard Cabins, for example, which is venture backed. I think they certainly have more than 13 units on each location. What the kind of different experiences you've had there, and whether you prefer a particular model. I presume it's Open Sky, but just tell us a little bit about the differences between those two models as a GM.
Right. So joining Getaway at the time, I think that was 2019 or 2020, I can't think, but they only had, I think, 6 properties at the time, and so they're still getting everything together, but doing a phenomenal job. Huge learning experience for me. So it was a great experience to get away. But at those properties, one I had 40 units, the other I had 36 units, whereas here at Open Sky currently is 13 units plus a restaurant. So at Getaway, not Postcard Cabins, but Getaway at the time, there was a self check-in process, so no front desk, no F&B, nothing like that, just straight up the rooms. Whereas here at Open Sky, even though we have fewer units, the operation is more complex. It's also off the grid. What I like about Open Sky is that with fewer units, we can be much more personable with our guests. So I'll get to know, some of the guests. I'll run into them at the front of house, in the lobby. And I would also say that here at Open Sky, I have a lot more autonomy. I know that things have changed at Postcard Cabin since I've been with them. That was a while ago. But yeah, a lot more autonomy, interfacing with bigs, possibly on a daily basis.
Have you got a favorite part of the job at Open Sky?
Favorite part of the job, what I like about GMing in general is the scope of responsibility and the variety of it. To me, that's super interesting. I like having a lot of responsibility on my back and then finding the right people that I need to help me with that, which we have some phenomenal managers and department heads here. So yeah, I'd say it's the responsibility and then the variety of the job. One day I might be working in my office in Excel. Another day I might be, washing dishes or working the front desk or doing something out in the field.
And do you enjoy the interactions with guests as well?
Yeah, I love the interactions with guests. It's easy for me to get caught up in everything in the office. But if I'm passing through the front of house like I did last week, I ran into somebody. I was actually going to the lobby to meet somebody and I mistook a guest for somebody else. And he started talking to me about his experience and said, your guys' hospitality is just phenomenal. I'm from the South, so I have very high expectations for that. And you guys just knock it out of the park, to paraphrase. And for that, that's a very grounding experience. Because it kind of takes me away from the screens, the spreadsheets, everything, and reminds me that this is the end result of all of those efforts.
Yeah, and every operator I speak to always has stories of how the people come up to them and say, "Hey, you've saved my marriage, or you've repaired a relationship, or you've strengthened a relationship." I presume you've had your fair share of those stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember at Getaway. Guests would leave behind notes, which we would collect and put up on a big cork board. And this was around COVID. So, people were cooped up in cities and just kind of like losing their minds, and coming out to Getaway at the time and disconnecting from everything was a very revitalizing, transformative experience for them. And you absolutely see the same thing here at Open Sky.
Yeah. So, Bygnal, I want to ask you, what does Wes do better than you as a GM?
Oh, this is going to be a good one. Everything. As far as for Wes, like he's got some incredible skill sets that does. So like some of the different things is understanding structure, systems, business development on a lot of different regards, HR, like his hiring, and just like his written communication and just overall just being consistent, like being steady, like I can depend upon him. And like, and the team knows he's going to be there, when he's going to be there. And he's got a flow now, which everybody's been building into the ecosystem. That to me has been incredible to see Wes build and create that here.
Do you think you would have been able to do that yourself if you had enough time, or do you think it's something that someone needs a unique skill set for?
I'm sure I could have got to some degree of something, but it would have never been to the level or sophistication as Wes has been able to take it.
Yeah. And what's it allowed you to do bringing Wes in? That's freed up your time to focus on other things. Is there anything in particular that you've been able to do that's really brought the business along since Wes has arrived?
I think it's been refining as far as the amenities and the property. Like we've had to bootstrap this place to where it's been pretty much torn up in construction every winter. And that just takes so much to put it back together and continue to improve things. So for example, like this last spring, my big project was remodeling the outdoor patio of the restaurant. We just outgrew it. So it's allowed me to work more on the business versus in the business, which has been really, I think, good for the rest of the team because, yeah, I mean, we're growing, we're getting more units, the restaurant's expanding, and the company's growing. So if I don't get out ahead of the company and continue to steer it and make it grow, then everybody's just going to kind of stall. And you know how that goes. It just kind of becomes a moot point.
So if you're hiring new staff now, who handles that?
Wes does. Wes handles all the hiring. If it's like say in the leadership team, I'll probably have a little more of a hand in that. But for the most part, Wes handles everything.
Mm-hmm. And what's your approach to hiring? Wes, kind of questions that you ask. What are you looking for in a hire?
Yeah, when I'm hiring, I like to focus more on a person's character than their skill set. Because they can learn skills, we can teach them what they need to know. But finding somebody with really good character those people are just priceless. And so I try to ask questions or see their reactions in a way that kind of shows me what their character might be. And in the end, you never know 100% what you're going to get, no matter how many questions you ask. You hire somebody, you give it a few months, and then you have a good sense for this individual. But yeah, I like to focus on character.
Any particular questions you'd ask to get an insight into that?
Oh, first of all, how they've dealt with difficult situations in the past. If they have anything, derogatory to say about their past management, I would ask them. I would dig a bit into that to see what's going on there. And yeah, it's mostly that. It's mostly listening to them talk about their previous work experiences with other people and how they work with those people. And I think that can really bring to the surface, at least some hints or clues to what their character might be.
Okay. We're coming towards the end now. One thing I'd be curious to know about, and both of you can answer this, starting with Wes, what's the most challenging thing about operating a glamping resort?
It's finding the right people. So we identify seats here that we need, and then trying to find the right people that fit in those seats that can, operate with us. So, and especially in locations like around here or in the locations when I was with Getaway, hiring was incredibly hard. Getaway, I was housekeeping, I was maintenance, I was laundry, I was everything before I got to be a GM. And, here, it's a bit easier than there, but yeah, the biggest challenge is finding those right people. We have a small team here for our property, and so we want to be very picky with who we bring on board.
Are they commuting in? Do they live on site? What's their kind of situation there?
So we do have a few staff who live on site. And so Tomas, our guest experience manager, we have our laundry attendant, and one of our staff with Black Sage, the restaurant. But when I hire, I try to hire within a 45-minute radius because that can really detract people. And they might say, yeah, I can commute an hour one way, twice a day. But give it a couple of weeks and they might get fed up with it. So I do try to do this 45-minute radius from Open Sky when I hire.
And Bygnal, what's the most challenging thing in your mind about operating a glamping resort? Probably got a huge, like an 8-page list, right?
Yeah. My first thought is run. But if you decide to stay, just realize what you're going into. Like, you have to pretty much pay to like put yourself through like some of the most like serious and strenuous situations that you had no idea to even expect. I think one of the most challenging but most rewarding things is the uncertainty. Like, every day you don't know what's going to happen. Whether it's like, or your utilities, or just like we're being off grid, is like, is the power going to go down today? I'm gonna have to get up at 2:00 in the morning because the generator, something mechanically happened to it. Guests found a mouse inside their tent, unfortunately, or there's a little baby skunk was running around. So you just kind of really never know what's going to be, which also creates a challenge and a unique perspective. If you look at it a positive way, then you can just learn from that and have fun with it and enjoy it. And it's like, oh, this is part of the journey. Like, it is what it is. So that's probably the biggest thing for me, is that, and just realize what you're getting yourself into. And it's a 24/7 business. That's probably the most challenging thing is.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Is you do, I think you do just have to learn to roll with the punches a little bit. Like, no matter what you do, the punches will always come, and you just got to figure out just to approach it with a bit more of a lighter heart about it. Because if you let everything get to you, same with Posh, like building what we were building, trying to raise the capital, trying to get the construction done. If you take everything to heart all the time, then it's just going to drag you down completely, right? And you're going to be useless to everyone. So that's what I would say as well, is just learning to roll with the punches and just accepting that they do come as part of the business, and hopefully you'll be able to deal with them. You did just remind me, Bygnal, when you said kind of run. I think the first time we had you on the podcast, we asked you, are you happy with your decision to start a glamping business? And you were like, I don't know. Maybe ask you another time. So I'll ask you again. Are you happy with your decision to start a glamping business?
It's getting closer, Nick. It's getting closer. It's not quite there yet.
Okay.
Maybe in a year we'll have a different answer for that one, but cool. It's getting closer.
Right. Well, Wes is happy because he's got a job out of it, so I'm sure. But okay, so future plans. I know, Bygnal, you've had your eye on expanding further for a while. What would that mean for, and maybe you haven't discussed this, but what would that mean for, your guys' relationship? So, would you think, would you stay on the ground at Open Sky? Would there be a multi-operation kind of setup? Have you had any kind of ideas about what that would look like if you did expand?
We've been talking about it, and I think it's pretty difficult for a small company, and that's a big, huge step in that. And so it's like, okay, one person, like, going to have to be in one or two spots at that point in time. Somebody's going to have to trust like part of the team that understands the culture to be there. So it may be, I may be speaking out of terms here as far as with Wes, but maybe it's like an assistant GM here at Zion. If we were to say expand to another location, that Wes would go over there and open that one up and kind of bring over certain key team members that we need to kind of go launch that. But it's going to take us several years to say, if we did do another spot, to build it out, get all the construction on that side. Wes, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm super excited to see Open Sky grow. Love this company, and I would, as we grow and scale and everything, my goal would be to step into a greater role at Open Sky.
With a pay rise.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So I've got one more question for each of you as well. You've both worn the GM hat, obviously, and you both had a hell of a lot of experiences in that role. So starting with you, Bygnal, if you had one piece of advice for a prospective glamping GM, what would it be?
So is this like for somebody like looking to get into the space, or a different like GM coming from the hotel industry, or like what do you like?
I think most listeners will be thinking of starting their own glamping operation or outdoor operation, and they will at some point wear the that GM hat. So with that context, what would your advice be?
I think the first thing is be empathetic, be humble, be a good listener, and communicate well. I think if you can kind of get those off the bat, and be a good leader and jump in with your team. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, jumping out there, be where you need to be at. And just being able to recognize individuals and their strengths, because it's all, really it comes down to, it's a people game. It's like, how do you structure your team? How do you find their skill set? How do you make them happy? How do you put them in that right position? So just reading books, psychology, learning about different personalities. And I didn't really understand that going into it. And then just realize it's 24/7. it's hard to get a day off, and just have to accept the fact that it's gonna be a lot of long hours.
Yeah, I think Biggs nailed it. It's a mindset. You have to enter it with humility and empathy. You know, it's important to look at problems as challenges, because the most wild problems are going to pop up, and you have to have that positive approach when you're dealing with them. And I think, in this industry, common sense goes such a long way. It's something else I look for during my interviews, jumping back to that question. And then finally, having a systems mindset. I think it's all about the systems and the consistency of those systems. And if you got the right systems in place and they work and people abide by them, then everything else flows out of that.
Okay. Could you, just before we finish off, is there an example of a system that you've implemented that could illustrate that a little bit?
Yeah, I think systems around communication are probably the most important, and you have to have a constant flow of communication. So we use Slack here, and we currently have Tomas, our guest experience manager, who's also heavily involved in tech, working on optimizing Slack for all of our communications purposes. So when I first got to OpenSky was using Slack, but at that point, at a more basic level. And now we have workflows. We have Biggs, what do you call those board canvases that we use for projects? And so all of those systems are incredibly important, and especially for front desk, like having a daily report that's kept updated, and it rolls to the next shift and the next day and the next shift and the next day, making sure nothing falls through the cracks. So those communication systems are crucial.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gents. Wes, it was a pleasure to have you on for the first time. Bygnal, you're now tied with the Glamping UK founder, Callum McLeod, for the most appearances on this podcast. So we need to get you on one more time to get the crown.
Well, I feel honored.
We'll make sure Connor's on the next one and he's not lazing about again.
Yeah.
Joking, Connor, obviously. Well, thank you, gents. That was really useful. It's good to get into the nitty gritty of what it's like actually operating one of these things. And I know, Bygnal, it's well established now that you've got your fair share of war stories, so it's always good to hear more of those. So thank you, gents. Again, I'm sure we'll have you both on again. But until then, thank you.
Yep. Pleasure, Nick.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Thank you.